Do we have Jim Ryan? We are getting Jim Ryan here momentarily at 7:20, Big 550 KTRS. They're talking, the latest is 57,000 kids. I heard 90,000 kids. I've heard hundreds of thousands of people. We don't even know how many people we're talking about, but this humanitarian crisis that is going on at the border and around the border has, sort of touched all sorts of controversy. Do we have Jim Ryan? We got him? Ready to go. Let's check him in. Jim Ryan with ABC News in Dallas. Good morning, Jim.
Hey, McGraw. How are you?
Let's talk about this bipartisan legislation in a second. But first, do we have any numbers as to how many people and kids we're talking about?
Well, it's a minimum of 52,000 unaccompanied minors who have come across the border this fiscal year. This all relates to money, and so it's measured in fiscal years, which begins and ends in October. It's expected, and you're right on these numbers, it's expected by the end of this fiscal year, this coming October, that around 90,000 will have made their way into the country. These are unaccompanied minors from other parts of the world, primarily from Central and South America, McGraw.
All right. Now, are these children literally being held in a giant facility?
Well, yeah, in several facilities, actually, in some either disused schools, some housing facilities that have been put together down along the border. Here in Dallas-Fort Worth, the county judge is opening up several facilities as well for as many as 2,000 of these kids to come here. They would renovate a couple of disused school campuses. There's also one warehouse that's operated by Parkland Hospital, which may be converted to use as a housing facility.
All right. And the law says that we treat children differently from Central America as opposed to Mexico.
Under a 2008 piece of legislation. That's right, McGraw. That's what this piece of legislation that's being brought this week by would try to revise or refine. This is called the Helping Unaccompanied Minors and Alleviating National Emergency, or HUMANE Act. And yes, it would turn that process around. It would treat those Central and South American kids the same way that kids from Mexico are treated. There's an expedited process to get them back into their home countries.
I thought they wrote this law and signed by the Bush administration because they were trying to avoid some of these children being taken up by sex traffickers and bad people like that.
Exactly. And Cornyn says that he wants to ensure that those kids do have safe passage back down to their countries, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, these places where they're coming from. He says the last thing he wants to have is more victims of the sex trafficking and drug trade.
So this law will undo the one law, but how will it solve that problem from making sure they don't get caught up in anything terrible like that?
Well, for one thing, it would ensure, and by the way, I wouldn't say it will do anything because its passage certainly is not guaranteed. If it were to pass, it would require immigration judges to make a quick determination on how these kids should be handled. Some of them, it's thought, would be able to stay in this country with sponsors if, in fact, they've come from situations of crime and violence and essentially domestic terrorism in places like Honduras, with a sky-high murder rate. Others would be quickly taken back down to their home countries, reunited with their families. You're right. I mean, it doesn't do everything that the 2008 legislation would not do, but it's an effort by these two, by Cornyn and Cuellar, to try to refine that process.
I know this is a relatively new development. Has the White House commented at all on this legislation?
Yeah, Josh Earnest has given sort of a nod to this. He knew that it was coming and has sort of said that he would support this sort of thing. President Obama was here in Texas last week and said that he wants to see a quicker process toward getting these kids sent home. So it may be something the president can support. There are other Democrats around the country, though, who are looking at it and say that they absolutely cannot. They feel that it's simply too dangerous to send these kids back into places where crime and violence are so prevalent, McGraw.
Yeah, that was my next question. You talk about this bipartisan bill won by a Republican senator and a Democratic House member. Democrats have come out and criticized it. Have other Republicans come out and criticize this as well, as being too lenient?
Not yet. It seems that the preponderance of opposition is coming from the Democrats right now, although it is also seeing some support from some Democrats. Harry Reid, though, notably, the Senate Majority Leader, said that he does not want to see this pass. He calls it way too broad, and that the number one concern should be the narrow issue of taking care of the situation on the border. He says, quote, the corn and quail legislation covers a lot of other issues other than problems we're having at the border. So, yeah, you're already seeing some fairly high-powered opposition to it. John Boehner says he may come out with his own proposals in the next couple of days.
Jim Ryan, ABC News reporter in Dallas. Jim, if nothing happens, which we can probably debate is whether or not that's probably the standard, is that they won't agree on anything. These children will just continue to be warehoused in this facility, just sort of by themselves with 50,000 other kids.
Well, yeah, kind of. It's not a facility. It's not just one giant place. There are several places that have been set up, and as you know, controversially, many of these children have been taken to other places: California, Arizona, Oklahoma. So there are lots of small facilities, and I think interestingly, the Parkland Hospital facility here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area actually is a warehouse. So, I think they're trying to avoid the specter of children being warehoused in places. And by the way, there are a lot of church organizations and charity groups that have come forward to offer help, humanitarian-style help to these children, provide them clothing, food, and some kind of diversion while they're waiting for their immigration hearings to come forth.
What ages are we talking about? I mean, how young are these children?
Some are very young. We're talking infants who were carried into the country by other kids, 15, 16 years old. So we're talking some very young people and up to 17, 18 years old.
Jim Ryan, ABC News reporter, talking about this bipartisan legislation that's getting a little traction. Jim, great job. As always, be safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, McGraw.
728 here, Big 550.